Hello, and I want to welcome you to part 3 of a webinar series called Leveraging Technology to Gain Equity Through Practice. Today's focus is going to be SIOP strategies, and this particular webinar was recorded without any participants, but it was created for participants. So you're going to see some slides we'll skip through. This is for our participants so that they know that we are going to be recording this. And for you, just so you know, you're going to be able to see us on YouTube later. So that's probably where you're watching this video right now. And this is me. My name is Amanda Arcio. I am a digital ambassador with Nevada Digital Learning Collaborative. I'm also working in Nye County School District as a learning coordinator currently. My focus is math and science for the most part, but I do a little bit of other things as well, depending on where I'm needed. And as most educators know right now, in COVID times, we are needed in lots of different places. So the participants were asked what goals or resolutions they have for 2022. So I urge you to take a moment. Obviously, you won't be sharing with me, but think about those goals or resolutions that you made. And I know that a lot of people think that there's no need to make resolutions, at the new year, but it's a symbolic time. So whatever goals you may have, I hope you are making progress towards those goals, and that they're not just professional, right? We have to think about balance now more than ever, perhaps, and make sure that the goals that we're creating are not just, professional in nature, but they also reflect what we want for our life outside of work. So the first thing I'm going to show you is I put a QR code up here for you, for the viewers. So if you take out your cell phone, put the camera app on and hold it to well, not next to the screen, but in front of the screen so that you can capture this image in the middle of your view on the phone, on the camera app. It will open up a link for you. And so that link is also here. When you click on that, or you go to the QR code, it'll bring you to this SIOP Strategies worksheet. It'll probably force you to create a copy of it, but basically what it is it's going to give you the documents that I'm going to be referencing. It's going to give you a folder of strategies that we'll talk about. It's going to give you the deck that I'm showing you right now, the Google slide deck. Plus there's going to be a hyperlinked blog article that you can check out. All right, so the agenda for today is just some quick business about the webinar series. If you've joined me for the other 2 sessions, and you'll know what I'm talking about. And then when we get to SIOP, we're going to talk about the 8 components that that make up the SIOP strategy, but also the 30 features and how they're nested between those beneath those components. We're going to look at some GoTo strategies. I have a folder of GoTo strategies for you. And then we're going to take a closer look at some of those favorite strategies and create those in a way that make them easy to use for digital learning and teaching students from a distance. All right, so our series here is leveraging technology to gain equity through practice. We already had identifying opportunity and brain balance. Those are both done. This is our SIOP strategies. So our next 2 are depth and complexity. That is a webinar on icons. And then building community, which is kind of wrapping it all up and talking about the importance of the relationships and the SEL that you have in the classroom, in addition to the academic strategies you're using. That's on May 11th. So before we jump into SIOP strategies, I wanted you to take a look at Nevada's English Language Development Standards. Number 1 says social and instructional language. English language learners communicate for social and instructional purposes within the school setting. Number 2, the language of language arts. English language learners communicate information, ideas, and concepts necessary for academic success in the content area of language arts. And the next ones are very similar to number 2. So it's the language of mathematics, the language of science, and the language of social studies, is that they are using language to communicate information, ideas, and concepts necessary for academic success in those content areas. Okay. So what is SIOP? SIOP is an acronym that means Sheltered Instruction Observation Protocol. And it's a research-based model that's proven effective at meeting academic needs of students who are English language learners. So while oftentimes SIOP strategies are used specifically with EL kids, it's important to note that they help all students, right? It offers clarity in a level that's helpful to all students. So students that may be struggling with processing issues or may need some extra time to think things through, like offering them opportunities of clarity is going to help all students. Okay, like I mentioned before, there are 8 components and 30 features, and we're going to talk about those in a moment here. The focus of SIOP is on language and clarity in teaching. So again, it's that clarity component that is really helpful for all of our students. So the 8 components of SIOP are lesson preparation, building background, comprehensible input, strategies, interaction, practice and application, lesson delivery, and then review and assessment. These are our 8. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to break them down one by one and show you the different elements that are beneath each. So the different features that are beneath each. But first, I wanted to show you key language features that are associated with each component. So with lesson preparation, we're looking at language objectives and language practice. With building background, we're emphasizing key vocabulary for our students. With comprehensible input, it's appropriate speech and clear intentions, or excuse me, clear instructions. For strategies, we want to use a variety of question types. For interaction, we want it to be student-to-student interactions as well, not just interactions between ourselves, the educators, and the students, but also between students, right? We want that discourse happening between students. Practice and application is applying the language and integrating the 4 skills. Lesson delivery is supporting language objectives, and review and assessment often has us reviewing vocabulary that we've built throughout the lesson. So lesson preparation features. So if you click on up here, the little video, it'll show you, the link, it'll show you a quick video. I'm going to show you the video in a different tab in a moment. I'm going to stop sharing the whole tab for a moment, and then I'm going to share just the web so you can hear the volume of the video. And then I will mute myself so all you're hearing is the video, not me breathing into the microphone. All right, I appreciate your patience while I go back and forth with the screen share. So we're going to be showing a couple of videos or a few videos as we go along, and I'll have to stop sharing the slide deck and share the videos so that you can hear the volume on the video properly. So I just wanted to let you know that's why I was doing that. So here we go. Lesson preparation features. You want clearly defined content objectives for students. First of all, when you are in the classroom and you're sharing clearly defined objectives, it helps the student know where they're at. And so when you're doing your lesson prep to create clearly defined content objectives from a student's perspective, from with student language, it helps offer clarity to you as well. So having that is really great. Clearly defined language objectives for students. So if we're teaching science, here are the science objectives, but also here's what I'm expecting from you in terms of language, right? That's where that clarity component comes in. We want content concepts that are appropriate for the age and educational background of our students. We want supplementary materials used to a high degree, making the lesson clear and meaningful. For example, we want graphs, models, visuals. We want adaptation of content to all levels of student proficiency. So our students who are really proficient in this should not be navigating work that is at an introductory level, right? It should be at their level. And we want meaningful activities that integrate lesson concepts, for example, surveys and letter writing. For building background features, we're going to show another video and then I'll talk about these 3 components. So this video here, one moment. Okay, let me share this one. And I'll be going on mute again for this. All right, so we're going back to this slide. With building background features, as she explains, we want the concepts to be explicitly linked to students' background experiences. So using words that link it, like she said, you can bring out an overhead slide, you can bring out decks that you've showed them, you can pull down a map and explicitly explain to them how their background experiences and how past learning and new concepts link, right? So it's building those bridges between what the kids already know and maybe learned outside of class, what they've learned here in class before or in last school year or the year before, whatever that is. So learning that they have previously accomplished, whether in or out of school, and linking that to the new concepts that we're bringing to them is critical. And so we also need to make sure that our vocabulary, our key vocabulary is emphasized. And she mentions doing it repeatedly, right? So you can have it written, repeated, highlighted. But the point there is that you're building a shared vocabulary. So students are learning, both English language learners and your students who are already proficient in English are learning the appropriate vocab to discuss the content that you're putting on the table for them. So it is absolutely critical that they not only have the words, but that they understand maybe the nuanced differences between the words in situations where there are some, multiple meanings or could be used with different connotations. All right, comprehensible input features has 3 features as well. So I'm going to share that with you now. All right, I like that one. If they're not using English, they're not going to learn English, right? Okay, so she talks about comprehensible input features. And what they discuss is that we need to be using speech that is appropriate at the student's proficiency level. So if we have lower levels, for example, and we need to slow down our rate and enunciation, that's fine. That's appropriate for beginners, though slow down pace and simple sentences, right? We need to have an explanation of academic task that is clear and tied to the original point, the speech that's appropriate for proficiency level. You want to have it clear, and you want to have it understood by all students at different levels. And then you want to use a variety of techniques to make concepts clear. For example, you can model, you can have a visual, you can have hands-on activities. She talks about using graphic organizers at the elementary level, which are also helpful, honestly, at the high school and the secondary level, but also having study guides at the secondary level, but have things maybe that are partially filled in for students who are still developing language. So they can not only hear your words of instruction, but they could see modeled on the paper, the parts that you already have filled in, what you're looking for. All right, so strategies features. All right, so as she talks about in that video, there need to be ample opportunities for students to use cognitive, metacognitive, and social or affective strategies, consistent use of scaffolding techniques throughout the lessons themselves, and assisting and supporting student understanding, such as think alouds or other strategies where teachers can kind of guide where the students are going cognitively are helpful. And then the teacher uses a variety of question types, including those that promote higher order thinking skills throughout the lesson. So literal, analytical, and interpretive questions can help with the development of concept, with the analysis of the actual concept, and then interpreting it for application in other areas, right? So the strategies that the teacher is using needs to be varied so that students have an opportunity to learn in all the different ways with the material that's provided. Now, interaction is another component that I will show you the video for right now. All right. So as she talks about in this video, we want to have frequent opportunities for interaction and discussion among students, between teacher and students, but really allow those students to have time to talk with each other, because that encourages elaborated responses about lesson concepts. And one of the things that she mentions is the amount of time. So it's like 70 to 80% of classroom time is currently filled with the teacher speaking. And we are not encouraging language development at a level that we should be encouraging it if we're only giving the students 20 to 30% of the time to communicate, right? So we need to be able to give them more space and time to do that. And that's where the importance of lesson planning comes in, because then you can encourage strategies and activities for students that allow them to engage with the language and share the language with each other and with the teacher more often. All right, grouping configurations need to support language and content objectives of the lesson. So you want to make sure that if you are putting groups or pairs together, that you're encouraging groups that will participate together, and not creating groups where maybe you have people that are disengaged for one reason or another. You want to consistently provide sufficient wait time for student response. I know that as a teacher, this was a weak point for me. This is still something I work on when I'm doing training with teachers or administrators. You already have anticipated what you're going to ask. You've anticipated what comes next, right? But the people who are experiencing your lesson, or the people who are experiencing the training that you're doing, they haven't. And so they're living in the moment while you're living in the future. And so you need to give them more time than what you may think is necessary. So if you need to count in your head, if you need to just frequently practice this where you are counting in your head and eventually you won't need to anymore. However you handle that, you need to make sure that you are giving sufficient wait time for student response. If you don't, what's going to happen is you're going to teach your students that they don't ever have to respond, right? If they just wait you out, which won't take long, then they don't have to participate at all. And that's not the type of behavior we're going to try to encourage in the classrooms. And then you need to give students ample opportunity to clarify key concepts in their first language. So if their first language is not English, you want to give them an opportunity to clarify concepts in their language, whether they're sharing that with other people in the classroom, or they're trying to share with you while they're trying to help you understand what they're saying. Either way, you want them to clarify the concepts in their language, because when they do that, they're not struggling with the translation part in their head, right? They're just doing it straight in their language, so you can understand more easily if they have the concept down or not. All right. Practice and application features are next. All right. So with that particular share, I wanted you to see in action the practice and application features. So the teacher was providing hands-on materials or manipulatives for students to practice using that new content knowledge. What she was doing is she was giving them the opportunity to draw something so that they had a memory, something quick in their heads that they can use to remember the differences between those two words. She provided hands-on activities for them to apply the content and language knowledge in the classroom. So when she was reading to them and asking them to stop and reflect upon the way they use the word draw in that little reading segment, she was giving them an activity to apply some of the learning that they had earlier. And then she was using activities that integrate all language skills. So reading, writing, listening, speaking. What we got to hear or watch was we saw them listening to her while she read. And she was going to be leading into, it sounded like some reading strategies that the kids were going to get to use their new knowledge applying to. All right. With lesson delivery, the features here, I'm going to show you this video. All right, so we saw her sharing the lesson and actually utilizing those little cards that the students had made in the previous video that we watched. And then they were able to look by doing some reading that she had the sentences on the board. They were reading the sentences, but she was cueing them into context and contextual language that will help provide clues as to which form of the word, or which, I guess, definition of the word was meant by the word draw in that context or that sentence. So again, the content objectives are clearly supported by lesson delivery. We saw that the language objectives were clearly supported by the lesson delivery. The students were engaged every step of the way. So with exception to her reading the sentences aloud for the students, or her originally, showing the students how do you look at the words around the word that we're looking at to determine the context of the situation. The rest of the time it was students engaging by showing their side of the paper, whether it was, like drawing a card draw or drawing like a picture draw, right? And then the pacing of the lesson was slower, and it was an approximate to the student's ability level. So the students weren't super advanced with language skills, but they were certainly advanced enough that they could keep up with her in this lesson. So her lesson delivery features were very student focused, and they kept on target with the objectives, both with content and language, and kept in mind the student's development. So then we have review and assessment features. So we are going to watch this video. All right, so with that review and assessment, the features that we observed there were the portfolio strategy that they used. When you're thinking about the different features of the review and assessment component, you're looking for things that have or provide an opportunity to do a comprehensive review of key vocabulary within a unit, say, or a lesson, a comprehensive review of key content concepts. You want to have regularly provided feedback given to students on their output. So for example, language content and the work quality itself. You also want to conduct assessments of student comprehension and learning of all of the lesson objectives. So you could do spot checks, group response throughout the lessons, right? That's all forms of assessment. But going to the concept that they showed in the video, this portfolio concept, one of the strengths that I think exists there is that students are able to see their growth over time. So I know a lot of more progressive schools, when they're thinking about how to do grade recording or making sure that students are progressing in one particular area or building the skills needed to be proficient in a particular area, they do use these portfolios. And so the students are able to see, to showcase what they've learned, but they're also to see historically, where did they begin? Where are they now? And that gives them that internal sense of reward, right? Like we're actually progressing with what we're doing here. And so that's a really valuable thing when you're considering what to do to keep students motivated. All right, so I want to do a GoTo Strategies folder walkthrough. So when you click on this link, which you'll also find in that document that you used your QR code, use that QR code for. When you click on the document, you're going to see a number of strategies. So when you go into this folder, you could take any one of these and copy it for your own use. You'll see that there's the strategies are named. So H charts, backwards book walk, canned questions, direct reading, jigsaw reading, so on and so forth, right? We've got a whole bunch of strategies in here. These strategies can be used in class or digitally. So what I did when I created this presentation was I gave you the folder so you could use these however you want. But I also want to talk about how you're going to use those digitally, right? Because that's the whole point. Like Nevada Digital Learning Collaborative is sponsoring these webinars, so they want to show how you can improve, teaching or lessons or whatever you could improve digitally for the kids, so that we can utilize it in cases where we do have to go virtual. So those strategies are yours to keep. You have those in the folder. And then there's a document called, I think it's called the GoTo Strategies document. If you look at page 19, you're going to see this, there's two slides here, right? A table. And the table was too large for me to fit on one page, and because I wanted you to be able to read it. So these two slides show it, but basically if you look from left to right, the columns are the levels. So they're entering, emerging, developing, expanding, bridging, right? They're learning. And then we've got the four components. We've got listening and speaking on this slide, and the next slide is reading, writing. What I want you to notice is, again, this is page, I think, 19 of that GoTo Strategies document, which is linked in the document that I shared with you through the QR code. It'll tell you what you might want to use when you are creating lessons and doing the planning in your lessons. If you know what level your student is and what component you're going to be using, whether it's which focus you're going to have, whether it's listening, speaking, reading, or writing, there are some suggestions here. So that maybe that's some way to cut down on time when you're thinking about, how you want to approach something. But I looked at some of our favorite strategies and I tweaked them for digital learning. And that's what I want to focus the rest of our time on. So we're going to start with signal words. So signal words are lists of words and phrases that are posted to help signal the four types of language structure. It falls under the building background, the component building background. And the purpose is to support our students reading and writing through varied types of text structure found in textbooks. So the compare, contrast, sequence, description, cause, and effect, right? Those are the things that we want to get the kids talking about. So those are the things that we're going to create the signal words or list of words around. Our content objectives are having students compare and contrast, be able to sequence, provide a description of, describe the cause and effect relationship of. So if this is like language arts, for example, these skills themselves are the content. But if this is, say, science, and you want students to compare different elements within science, then your content objectives are going to be using these strategies that they learned in English class to be able to engage with the content in the manner that you want them to. Language objectives, the student should be able to select the appropriate signal words for comparing and contrasting, and then whatever it is you want them to compare and contrast. They should be able to select the appropriate signal words for describing the sequence of events in whatever you want them to describe the sequence of events in. Select the appropriate signal words for writing a description of, you fill in the blank there, or select the appropriate signal words to describe the cause and effect of something, okay? Teacher words can be posted in your room as posters if you're teaching in person. You can give it to them as sheets or cards to keep at their desk as reference, or you can do what my recommendation is here. But first, I want to show you, here's some signal words. So if you're asking students to compare and contrast, you can give them a visual, like here's a Venn diagram showing this comparison and contrast. And then you give them a list of words. So for comparing, as well as, also, to, like, much as, similarly, or similar to. With contrast, you can give them other words like however, but, on the other hand, right? So you're giving them the language words associated with the skill that you want them to demonstrate. And you're giving them a picture so that when they look at this briefly, they're like, oh, okay, compare and contrast. Like, I get that, right? If you've used a Venn diagram before, then conceptually they should understand. So what I did was I created a signal words sheet here. So you can create an image that they can reference. If you click on the link, it'll take you straight to this, right? So this is yours to keep. If you're ever doing any sort of work with students and you want them to engage in comparing and contrasting cause and effect or problem solution, sequencing things, ordering things, or describing or listing things, you are welcome to use this slide. I put an image for each of those. So you could see that we've got the Venn diagram. We've got the, here's what leads to this. So cause and effect. We have a sequence or ordering for, we're going up a staircase and making progress there, and a list. The keywords for them to use are nested under each concept. So that's easy peasy for them. And then what you could do with this is you can either set this as you can share this, screen share with them. So it's sitting up there after you've given them instructions, explicit instructions on what you want them to do. You can put this up and then they can use this as a guide. You can have it behind you, like as your background, and you can kind of set to the side when you want to point out something to them. Or you can create a sheet like this for them and then just give them the link so that they can use this resource themselves, right? All right, our next strategy is KWL. You've probably heard about these. These are the know, want to know, and learned strategies. They're usually created on paper in tables. So this helps students activate background knowledge and identify what they want to know and organize their learning along the way. The SIOP component that this is also building background, similar to the last strategy we used. And the goal here is that we're activating prior knowledge and assessing students' existing knowledge of a topic, uncovering misconceptions, and allowing students input about what they would like to learn about the topic. So our objectives for content. Students should be able to brainstorm what they already know about the topic, so they're activating that prior learning. Identify what they would like to learn about the topic, list what they have learned about the topic, and then confirm or disprove information on the chart while adding newly learned information along the way. The learning objectives are students should be able to use the following sentence frames to state whether information is something they already know, something they would like to learn about, or something that they learned through the course of instruction. So when I've done this in class, I've either given them an actual, like, here's the template, or I've had them fold a sheet into thirds, and then each column is its own. If I have them fold a sheet on the left, it'll say, I know that, and then they fill in the blanks. The middle is, I want to know, fill in the blank, and then on the right, I learned, fill in the blank. So in theory, what you can have them do, depending on where you're using this in your lesson, is whatever's in the middle column, they can eventually fill in with on the right, right? So if they have a question in the middle, then before the end of the unit or the end of the lesson, they should have filled in some of those questions that they had. Before starting the KWL chart, you want to give the students some quiet thinking time so they can figure out how they're going to organize their information within their table, or make sure that you're giving them an adequate amount of instructions and then time to question you if they have questions. So what you can do is draw the KWL chart on the board or large chart paper. This is if you're doing it in person. You can also do this virtually. You can use slides to do this. There's a number of things you can do. Label the first box what we know, and then have them complete it as part of the intro of a lesson. Record the information that the students are brainstorming, and don't even worry about the accuracy here because we're going to clarify it later. Then you want to label the second box what we want to learn, complete it as part of the intro or lesson, the intro of a lesson or unit, and record all the information. And then the third box is what we learned. So you're going to complete this throughout the lesson or unit, and you're adding information daily as you're learning it, right? Misconceptions can be clarified in this column, and you can keep it posted throughout the lesson or student unit for reference. So what I did here for making it more digital friendly is I created a KWL chart in Padlet. So I'm going to show this video here. Hold on. And actually, I don't think it's a video. I think we're just taking a look at the slideshow. Yep. So I went to padlet.com. I created this free Padlet with my 3 columns. I know that there's my K, want to know, there's my W, and I learned that there's the L. And then I just simply can add underneath here what I want to put by clicking the plus sign. Please know that Padlet.com is free. You're allowed up to 3 active Padlets at a time. At that point, if you choose to not pay, then you have to archive the ones above the third. But if you want to keep it just at your free account, you can, like I said, you can archive, or you can move up to premium, and then you can have an unlimited amount of Padlets, but that's up to you how you do that. All right, so hold on, and you're going to learn a little bit about Padlet. All right, so let's go back to our presentation. The next strategy I want to talk about is canned questions. So the teacher writes questions related to the same topic at different levels of Bloom's taxonomy. The students are then asked to respond to questions in pairs or small groups. This falls under the strategies component of SIOP. And the purpose is to assist students with reading to find answers at various levels of difficulty. So you want them to use the text that you've given them to be able to answer the questions despite the level of complexity. Students should be able to respond to the questions of varying difficulty in a given topic, add to or change their predictions while reading the text. And this is a big one, right? They are allowed to change their mind as they gain more information. Encourage that behavior because we want them to use it across the board. And then identify character motivation and problems that characters face. So this is often used in ELA, and their language objectives are to display their knowledge about a topic using complete sentences and answer questions on increasingly complex levels of cognition using the following prompts. So for knowledge, the depth of knowledge, we have the definition of whatever your topic is blank. The student should be filling in the blank and you should be filling in the topic. Comprehension, this topic can be explained as blank. Application, an example of you fill in the topic is blank. Analysis, the topic can be compared to blank. For synthesis, if I created a diagram or illustration of teacher fills in the topic, I would include blank. And then finally, the evaluation level is we conclude or believe that the topic the teacher chooses is fill in the blank because fill in the blank, right? So it goes through those Bloom's levels. You can give them time between them. So as they're reading the text, maybe the first time you can ask them just for the knowledge or the basic comprehension, but as they maybe read it a second time or start having conversations and doing that discourse within their groups or with other students around them, have them fill in the more complex levels. So there are, it says use this link to create Bloom's questions. So that shows you the question stems that you can use. That's a PDF there. You can write 5 questions, 1 for each level of Bloom's on an assigned topic, group the students together based on their English proficiency, and give them questions of varying difficulty based on their ability. So for example, if you have a group that you know these students' level of proficiency in English is just not very high, you are not going to want to give them the highest level of questioning right away, and maybe not at all. It might not be appropriate. But as students respond, you want to adjust their questions based on their ability to accelerate. And you do want to give them maybe those sentence stems, right, to start their answers off with. So what I did here for this one is I gave you the canned questions in a slide deck. So what you can do is you can force share these. So if you copy this for yourself, which it should, again, when you get the your document from the QR code, you can click on this link and then copy it. So you have it as a teacher, you create one template, right? And then you force the students to copy it. And the way you do that is you share, you get the copy link. So if you watch up here, what I do is I Control V, so it's up there, but then I copy everything after this last slash, but not including that slash, right? So I've got everything from the edit on, and then you do copy. Now you're forcing your students to make a copy. When they do this, you're going to copy this URL and share that with them. When they do that, they're going to click make a copy, and that will be stored in their Google Drive. So when they're working on it, they can work alone and answer those questions alone, okay? So let's go back here. So what I did was I created this, and you can ask the students if you're teaching them virtually, you can introduce this concept of canned questions to them, give them the reading that you want them to focus on, and then let them know, hey, I gave you a slide for each. The definition is, the topic can be explained as, but if you know that you want each student to maybe, or each student group to maybe go up to a certain level, you could tell them, you know what, everybody's going to do the first 2 slides. But then after that, we're going to have these groups go up to slide 4. These groups go up to slide 5. The rest of you go up to slide 6 or 7. That is totally up to you how you organize that. But you can use this or a similar template to share with the students so they can answer the questions in writing. And then if you want to call on them once they've been given time, adequate time to think and then to respond and create their deck, then you can ask them to read out loud. And so they're practicing that speech too. All right. The next one I look at is backwards book walk. So the backwards book walk reverses the process of the typical picture or text walk. The SIOP component that it covers is building background. And the purpose is to familiarize students with a nonfiction text before they begin to read it independently. The students are provided with an introduction to important vocabulary, so they'll better comprehend the text information. So we're not waiting until after this is done to discuss the vocab, right? We front load them with vocab, and then the student should be able to read the conclusion of the text and use textual features to make predictions about what they're going to learn. So you're giving them the vocab up front. You're having them read either the last chapter of something, the last paragraph of a chapter, the last segment of a unit, whatever it is. It's the end of it that they're reading. And then they have to think based on what I was taught and the vocabulary I was given and what I read, what do I think this chapter is going to cover? And then they can add to or change their predictions as they're reading the full text that you want them to read. So some notes: you should have students working with a partner, have them read the conclusion of the chapter or whatever it is, and then have students continue to look over the chapter backwards, reading the headings, captions, and keywords in each section. After the students have looked through the entire chapter, have them guess the title of the text. Definitely have them talk about what it could be about, right? And then give them some quiet thinking time so they could share their thoughts with their partners or have partners share their ideas with the class. And so what I did here to make this user-friendly is I created a video all about a Jamboard that I would use for this. So here you go. All right, so that was using Jamboard again. And throughout this, if you're looking at the deck that you got from that linked, the hyperlinked document, just click on anything that looks like it has a hyperlink, and it probably does, right? It shows either a video or it gives you the actual uh, material or resource that I created. You can also click on the pictures because sometimes the pictures will have videos attached to them. All right, so we are at the end of our presentation. I want to thank you for taking the time to go through this with me. And that folder of strategies there's more strategies in there than what I adapted for this webinar today. But if you have questions, please do not hesitate to reach out. I'm pretty good at getting back within 24 hours, and quite frankly, usually within an hour. That's also my cell phone number. So you're welcome to text me if you have any questions. I just ask that if you text me, you don't just jump into a question, but you tell me who you are first. So I'm apt to respond. Learn more, familiarize yourself with SIOP strategies. I will tell you, while they were intended to serve students who are English language learners, the majority of our students in the state need the additional clarity. They need the additional help to really build proficiency. And so we need to start thinking about how to best serve all of our students. And while we often think of strategies that we utilize for certain populations of students, the truth is good practice is good practice, and it'll benefit all of our kids. So thank you again for your time. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. I will hopefully see you at the next presentation, which is all about depth and complexity using icons.